Australia has agreed to conduct more joint military exercises with the United States in the South China Sea but will not join the U.S. Navy in conducting Freedom of Navigation Operations or FONOPS in these waters. Australia's decision to forego FONOPS with the Americans was reiterated at the 30th Australia-United States Ministerial Consultations or AUSMIN 2020 held late July in Washington, D.C. Australia has announced no change to this position since this meeting. AUSMIN, however, saw the US and Australia signal their determination to strengthen defense cooperation, including on force posture, in the Indo-Pacific region. A joint statement by both countries acknowledged the presence of US forces in the Indo-Pacific has been vital to preserving the region's security and prosperity for 75 years. They signed a classified statement of principles on alliance defense cooperation and force posture priorities in the Indo-Pacific. The statement establishes a bilateral force posture working group that will promote a secure and stable region and deter coercive acts and the use of force by China. The US has kept urging Australia and its Royal Australian Navy join it in patrolling the South China Sea to keep China at bay. Like the US, Australia asserts China's claim to own practically the entire South China Sea as both illegal and nonsensical. Australia and the US urge China to abide by the 2016 decision of the Arbitral Tribunal in The Hague that China's maritime claims are not valid under international law. Australia and the US affirmed China cannot assert maritime claims in the South China Sea based on the discredited Nine-Line, historic rights, or entire South China Sea island groups, which are incompatible with the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea or UNCLOS. They said the 2016 arbitral award is final and binding on both parties and emphasized that all claims in the South China Sea must be made and resolved in accordance with international law. While brushing aside FONOPS, Australia is increasing the pace of its joint military exercises with the US last week. U.S. Air Force Northrop Grumman B-2 Spirit stealth bombers and Rockwell B-1B Lancer strategic bombers joined a combined United States-Australia exercise in Australia's Northern Territory. The massive, long-range bombers from the 393rd Expeditionary Bomb Squadron flew over 6,000 kilometers in multiple sorties from Naval Support Facility Diego Garcia to operate over the Delamere, Bradshaw and Mount Bundley training areas in Australia. The bombers flew the missions as part of a combined task force with the Marine Rotational Force Darwin and the Australian Defence Forces. The exercise focused on a Naval Expeditionary Force's ability to rapidly deploy, integrate with allies, coordinate airstrikes and call for close air support on enemy targets. The bombers provided air-to-ground support while U.S. Marines used both traditional and modern forms of target location and confirmation to call for coordinated, rapid airstrikes. Meanwhile, U.S.-China rivalry is set to dominate discussions as the foreign ministers of 10 Southeast Asian countries begin an online summit Wednesday, with Washington's top diplomat ready to take aim at Beijing's bullying in the South China Sea. The summit comes just days after China launched ballistic missiles in the Flashpoint waters as part of live-fire exercises and as Washington and Beijing clash over a range of issues from trade to the coronavirus. Ministers will be joined by U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo and his Chinese counterpart Wang Yi for their first summit since the U.S. announced sanctions on Chinese companies over Beijing's construction of artificial islands in the disputed waters. The resource-rich South China Sea is claimed in its entirety by Beijing but is also contested by Vietnam, the Philippines, Malaysia, Brunei and Taiwan. fresh spat between China and the Philippines over Scarborough Shoal, one of the region's richest fishing grounds, also hangs over the talks. The Chinese Communist Party is engaged in a clear and intensifying pattern of bullying its neighbors, Pompeo said ahead of the summit. Tensions over the Korean peninsula will also be high on the agenda. Talks between Pyongyang and Washington on North Korea's nuclear arsenal have been stalled since the collapse of a Hanoi summit between leader Kim Jong-un and U.S. President Donald Trump last year. The coronavirus pandemic is set to feature heavily in discussions. After Vietnam, the current chair of the Association of Southeast Asian Nations warned at a meeting in June that the fallout from the virus had swept away years of economic gains in the region. Vietnamese Prime Minister Nguyen Xuan Phuc said in opening remarks that people and enterprises are suffering from huge losses, and the geopolitical environment, regional economy, including that of the East Sea or South China Sea, are experiencing several upheavals, influencing peace and stability. The power rivalry between the US and China will likely steal the limelight. The United States and China will likely use the meetings as a platform to throw everything at each other. Smaller countries will say their usual lines and then take cover as Washington and Beijing fight, he added. Friction between the two powers is already high over trade, blame for the coronavirus pandemic, and China's policies in Hong Kong, where Beijing has imposed a draconian national security law. There is also angst that the virus may have provided cover for China to make new plays in the South China Sea. Zachary Abuza, an expert on Southeast Asian politics at the National War College in Washington, said there was unlikely to be much progress in talks over the disputed waters. China has effectively used COVID-19 assistance and promises of vaccines and trials in the Philippines and Indonesia to really try to quash any diplomatic momentum towards a discussion of the South China Sea.